this raises an important question. What is virtue? Thankfully, virtue is becoming a more commonly used term in recent years. However, I'm not sure we fully appreciate what virtue is. You see, normally we think of virtue in philosophical and more specifically, Aristotelian terms. Virtue is often thought of as good habits, and for the more philosophically minded, habits that form the soul and thereby predispose one to act in a certain manner. On these terms, virtue, in accordance with its Latin root virtus, describes various strengths of the soul. There is absolutely nothing wrong with this except its incompleteness. For as Christians, we are not simply out to become spiritually strong on a mundane level. Instead, as the request of the apostles reveals, we are looking to be strengthened by a power that goes beyond the human level. This is what distinguishes Christian virtue from mere philosophical virtue. For Christian virtue is nothing less than being animated by the life of God within, and more specifically, the life of the incarnate Son, Jesus Christ. For the Christian, to grow in virtue is to grow in conformity with the one who St. Paul refers to as the virtue and wisdom of God in 1 Corinthians 1 verse 24, Jesus Christ, and thereby allow him to live in and through us, as Paul teaches in the 2nd chapter of his letter to the Galatians. The virtue of faith, or the spiritual strength of faith, is one of the 3 theological virtues foundational to the Christian life, the other 2 being hope and charity. These 3 virtues are called theological virtues because their object is God. In other words, these 3 spiritual strengths empower the human soul to direct the whole of its life toward the purpose for which God has made us. Perfect participation in His very life. To be sure, there are things we can and must do to cultivate these virtues, together with all the other intellectual and moral virtues that characterize the Christian life. First and foremost among these things, however, is pray. We must pray for the virtues, for the spiritual strengths that form us into Christians, the spiritual strengths that empower us to live as Christ lives. The reason for this is that, as a participation in the life of God through, with, and in the incarnate Son, virtue is first and foremost a gift. There is absolutely nothing we can do to merit a share in God's life on our own. It must, first of all, be gifted to us by God. From there, we get to work, and through a life of prayer, fasting, study, and above all, participation in the sacraments, we, by God's grace, allow the life of Christ, that is Christian virtue, to animate the whole of our lives to an ever greater depth and degree. To reach perfection in the life of virtue is to reach perfect communion in the life of the triune God, through, with, and in the incarnate Son, Jesus Christ. However, we need not possess perfect virtue to get going, and this is what Jesus is driving home to us this week.
If you enjoyed this, hit that subscribe button and check us out at freshimage.org, where you'll find commentaries and articles on countless topics important for becoming the unique image of God you have been created to be. And be sure to check out FRESHimageMedia.com, our sister company, to discover Christian home goods and gifts deeply rooted in Scripture that you won't find anywhere else.